What's going on, guys? It's Cal here from Buffalo Sports Center. I am joined with Jaden today, and we are doing our final mock draft for the Buffalo Bills. The draft is right around the corner. Thursday is round one. Into the weekend, of course. Friday, round 2 and 3. Saturday, we round off the draft. Jaden, how excited are you for this year's draft?
Ooh, I am ready.
Absolutely. Let's get right into this thing. Of course, the Bills have a late first round pick, right? Because again, they come up short of the Super Bowl, but yeah, they almost get there. So they have a late first round pick. Jaden, who do you have the Bills taking in the first round?
First pick, 30th overall. I mean, they could trade down possibly and still get this person, but I have them taking defensive tackle Tyleek Williams from the Ohio State.
Yeah, this is a type of guy where I could definitely see them trading down to the, you know, early second round, which I actually probably would predict, right? I think the Bills, if they move at all, which they probably will move down just to get an extra pick. But Williams is a great guy. Again, he's a bigger guy, something that the Bills definitely need in that interior D line. Again, their run defense was terrible last year, so they could definitely use a bigger guy. He's 330 pounds. He's quick. He's pretty powerful as well. I mean, Jaden, he's pretty much the complete package and would help this defensive line immensely, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's the exact guy you want next to Ed Oliver. Ed Oliver, he's not small by any means, but he's a three tech, so you bring in another big guy, kind of like a Daquan Jones, just come in, eat up space in the middle, and free up the rest of the line.
And when's the last time the Bills have had a bigger guy like that on the D line? Of course, you could say Linval Joseph, but going before that, I mean, what Marcel Darius? This Bills
Star
defensive line
Lotulelei.
is, yeah, it's needed some bigger guys for the last couple of years for sure. So I think that's a great pick.
All right,
Let's move on to the next one. Yeah.
next up, we got the 56th overall pick, still in the second round here. We are going with cornerback Darian Porter out of Iowa State.
Yeah, again, I'm a big fan of this pick. Again, he's a pretty big guy, 6'3". He's got it all, right? Size, length, speed. One of those guys who's a good tackler, too. So I know we just, got Tre'Davious White back and Dane Jackson. And Dane Jackson's known as being a good tackler. But, I'd like to draft someone early on in the draft that could at least compete for a spot because those two guys are big question marks for me. So getting a guy like Porter, I think, would be good. Talk about his speed a little bit, right? In his 40-yard time.
Yeah, I mean, at 6'3", ran a 4.3 40-yard dash, which is, I mean, you don't see that every day, which probably explains why I have seen him compared to Tariq Woolen from the Seahawks, which is it's a pretty nice comparison for a guy that you could maybe get in the second round.
Yeah, I'd be very happy with this start to the draft. Let's move on to the next pick.
Still in the second round here, another second round selection for the Bills. We have edge rusher Josiah Stewart out of University of Michigan, opposite of our first round pick.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Stewart would be a very solid pick here at the end of the second round. The only issue is his size, right? He's a little bit smaller on the outside, but I think that kind of equals out a guy like Greg Rousseau, who the Bills just re signed long term.
Yeah, I mean, the Bills definitely have a type at defensive end. They usually like to go a little bit bigger there, but, obviously that hasn't always worked out for them in the last few years. So maybe they switch it up here and go with a guy who's a little bit smaller, but maybe a little more explosive off the edge.
Yeah, and again, they do need a little bit more speed off the edge. I've been saying it for years. How many times do we see a Bills D edge or D lineman go and they get pressure on the quarterback, but the sack doesn't come, right? Or at least in the big moments and in the playoffs. So I think getting a guy with a little bit more speed could pay off immensely, not only for sacks, but maybe a guy with a little bit more speed gets a little bit more pressure on the quarterback, forces some more interceptions, which again, our secondary might be rough this year. So I think that would be needed. Let's move on to our next pick.
Moving on to the fourth round here. Of course, the Bills traded away their third round pick. So we are here with our annual linebacker pick in the middle rounds, a guy who's been heavily linked to the Bills. We got Chris Paul Jr. out of Ole Miss.
Yeah, again, Chris Paul Sr. Getting near the end of his basketball career. All jokes aside, Chris Paul Jr., one of those guys who could replace a Balin Spector, right? A guy who could play special teams, who could be next in line on this linebacker tree. Again, Milano's contract just got restructured. So a lot of question marks in the linebacker position. Again, he's good with angles, a pretty solid tackler. I think a very good special team move, and I think definitely a guy the Bills could use on that special team and to be kind of a backup at linebacker for years to come. This is kind of a trend we've seen the last couple of years, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a Dorian Williams type of situation where, he may not really see the field the first year a whole lot, but once, like you said, Milano could be gone next year, and then, you got this guy who's been learning the system for a full year and, could maybe slot in, hopefully.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on to the next pick.
Next up, we have a slew of late round picks coming up here. First one, we have wide receiver Dante Thornton out of the University of Tennessee.
Yeah, and I think with Thornton, the ceiling is the sky for this guy. Again, he just has all the physical attributes. Again, we had a guy like that, like Justin Shorter, who was this big guy that didn't really pan out. But again, Thornton, he's got the height, he's got the speed. Again, 6'5", he ran a 4.30 40-yard dash. And Jaden, tell everybody who he's being compared to early on in this draft talk.
I mean, it's probably a pretty generous comparison for a guy who didn't produce a ton in college, but I mean, he has the build of a Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, hey, let's see. If the Bills could get a Calvin Johnson in the middle of the draft, I think we all would chalk this one up as a big fat W. And I don't think you could pass up on a guy if he's still here this late in the draft with those physical attributes. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, you've been looking for a vertical field stretcher for years at this point. I mean, if you could find one who also happens to be 6'5", I mean, it's worth taking a flyer on at this point in the draft.
Definitely. Let's move on to the next one.
Next up, we are going back to defense, and we are going with safety RJ Mickens out of Clemson.
Yeah, Mickens just screams Buffalo Bill, right? That they need a safety. He's a zone coverage guy. I mean, that's about all the thought that I'd have to put into this one, right? It just seems like a Bills pick. It seems like a guy who could, play that McDermott style defense. Am I missing anything with him here?
No, I mean, I think you're spot on with that. I mean, it's a guy who, played a lot of ball at a pretty big time program in Clemson. He's not flashy, but he's solid. And at this point in the draft, you can't really go wrong with a guy like that.
Yeah, any cornerback or safety that has to cover guys in these big conferences their entire college career is definitely more ready and more NFL ready than somebody from a smaller school. So even if you get kind of a B tier prospect from a big school, I still think they'd be better than the top cornerback on a C tier school or something like that. So I think it would be a solid pick in the middle of the draft. Let's move on to the next one.
Moving on to pick 170, one pick after our previous picks. We're on back to back here. We are going with maybe a slightly controversial one. We're going with a running back out of Auburn, Jarquez Hunter.
Yeah, and Hunter again. Let's talk running back for a little bit, right? James Cook. The situation was kind of dicey. Now it seems to have died down a little bit. Still not negotiating any contract talk with the Bills, but he was on, some live streams with Neon and all that, ripping up the other teams, logos and stuff. So it seems like he's still a Buffalo Bill at least for this season. So I don't think we're going to have to worry about him holding out or anything like that. But again, Hunter, a solid running back. He's got a little bit of quickness, a 4.4 40-yard time. A character guy too, a McDermott guy, as some would say, and he's definitely a good tackle blocker. Right, he can run through those tackles. He's a tough guy to bring down, which seems to be a newer trend that the Bills kind of wanted to get. Again, Ray Davis being one of those guys as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think like kind of similar to what we said about, like a Chris Paul Jr. and RJ Mickens, he's a guy that you don't know what's going on with Cook, and it's never a bad thing to have a guy with this kind of talent just kind of waiting on the runway, just, ready to go if you need him maybe, next year if Cook's not here.
Yeah, I think we definitely got to get a running back this draft just in case. So to get one in the later rounds, I think would be a good move, and I think Hunter this late would be a steal.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's move on to the next pick here.
We are only going three picks later, so I mean, once we get to that point in the draft, I mean, the Bills are going to be busy. We have cornerback Jordan Hancock once again out of Ohio State.
Yeah, I think this is a solid pick because Hancock is another guy who's known for his tackling ability, and that's something the Bills have struggled with as of late, right? How many times have we seen a Bills cornerback or safety, even on the D line, right, with that run defense, just not be able to tackle guys, and 2 yard gains turned into 10 yard gains. So anyone that can tackle is high up on my board. I know Jaden's the same way with that. Again, this guy very versatile, has played inside, has played the slot, has played outside against the best of the best in college as well. Being on Ohio State. The only issue is his coverage. Jaden, you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean he's not a great coverage guy, he can get beat off the line a little bit. He's not super quick, so if you get that first step on him, he might struggle to recover from that. But I mean, again, it's late in the draft. It's a guy that you're gonna have to work with. You gotta trust your coaches to develop him and, kind of refine that technique a little bit.
And anyone that has tackling high on their list is an easy guy for special teams. Even if you have the coverage ability of Kaiir Elam, if you could play special teams, you're going to make the Bills roster because McDermott definitely values special team guys above talent guys. We've seen it year after year. And again, if you could get a guy to play special teams for cheap for 5 years, even if they don't see the field on defense, it's worth a pick late in the draft. Let's move on to our second to last pick here.
Again, we're only going 4 picks after our previous one. We're doubling up on edge rusher, just like we just doubled up on cornerback. We are going with Tyrion Ingram Dawkins out of Georgia.
Yeah, this guy's as raw as authentic sushi. But with that being said, I mean, I think it is a very solid pick towards the end of the draft. Again, once we get down here towards the final couple picks that the Bills have, it's really just, going based on potential rather than talent because you're not going to find too much talent at the bottom of the draft. It's all kind of just projections. But he does have good size. I think that's one of those things where he is listed as an edge on some websites. He's listed as a D tackle on others. A very versatile guy on the D line. I think that's right up McDermott's alley.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, with that size, you could play around with the idea of him playing inside and out, kind of like a Quentin Jefferson type. He can play both if you really need him to. And I mean, doubling up on edge rusher here, the Bills only have 4 edge rushers on their roster right now because of Michael Hoyt facing that suspension. So I mean, like you said with the last pick, you get a depth guy for cheap. If he makes the roster, great. If not, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and I think you got to double up for sure, right? If you don't go into free agency and there's not really anyone else left, and you don't make any more trades for an edge rusher, you can't go with 4 or 5 edge rushers into the training camp, right? So obviously with Hoyt's suspension, and even looking at the D line with Ogunjobi's suspension too, I think D line's going to be heavy in this draft because of those suspensions. I think they got those guys maybe so they didn't have to double up, and now they're probably going to have to anyway, at least to cover up the first half of the year. Let's move on to our last pick of this mock draft.
With our final pick here in the 6th round, we are going with tight end CJ Dipre out of Alabama.
Yeah, this one is more of a scheme pick, more or rather than a talent pick. Again, the Bills are going to be lacking in tight end depth potentially this year. A guy like Quentin Morris, this could be a good replacement for him down the line. A good blocker for sure, and I don't think he's gonna make the team if we draft him right away. Could be a practice squad guy that gets called up, but again, you lose a guy like Mac Hollins who was as much of a blocking tight end as he was a receiver, if we're being honest, you lose a lot of blocking this year. And I think, this would be a good guy to block. Again, not really a receiving tight end, but if you're not going to trade either Knox or Kincaid, you don't really need another receiving tight end. I think you have almost too much of a problem there. With that being said, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head there. If you have Knox and Kincaid on your roster, you really don't need like we saw last year, Zach Davidson, like a guy who
Yeah.
is kind of similar to those two, mostly a receiver, not really a blocker, not a special teams guy. So, you go out, you get a replacement here potentially. I mean, another cost controlled guy. He can be your third string tight end practice squad guy, and he can block a little bit. I'm sure they can find some use on him for special teams and get your money's worth out of him.
Yeah, and if it's not Dipper, I think it's going to be another blocking tight end they draft late in the draft. Again, a lot of people got very annoyed but with the Davidson situation because he would be a backup tight end on a lot of teams. It's just the Bills don't have space for him. He's got a lot of talent. He's almost a receiver, if we're being honest. And, I know a lot of people were definitely annoyed with that in our DMs and comment section over the last season, especially that when the Bills tight ends, both of them had rough years. But that was our mock draft. Jane, do you have any final takes on this mock draft? Do you think they're going to do anything crazy with that first round pick? I know we didn't really do any trades in this mock draft. I mean, do you see them trading up potentially, most likely maybe back in the draft?
I don't really see them trading up unless there's somebody that they really love. I mean, Brandon Beane said it quite a few times. He usually only has about 20 guys with first round grades. So once you get to pick 30, most of those guys are going to be off the board. Most NFL teams, they might differ a little bit, but for the most part, they're going to have the same 20-ish guys that they see as first round talent. So I think if anything, you're going to see a trade back similar to last year, just pile up some more picks, especially without having a third round pick this year. I think the Bills will really maneuver around to try and recoup that pick. So I think trade down is most likely.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're all going to lose a little bit of sleep for no reason at all. I think they might pull a last year on us. But thank you guys for watching this video. Comment in the comment section if you agree with our picks, if you think we missed out on somebody. Again, predicting a mock draft is near impossible. The best of the best can't even do it. So, we'll see. We'll keep track of how many of these guys we get correct. Thank you guys for watching this video. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe. Thank you, Jaden, for joining us as always. And have a good one, guys. Peace out.